So welcome back to the FuturePrint Virtual Summit for the Industrial Print Day. I've got two gentlemen with me here today who are Graham Kennedy, who is Director of the Industrial Print Business at Ricoh, and Richard Darling, who is responsible for Strategic Business Development for Industrial Inkjet at Ricoh. This session, I think, is really interesting. It addresses a key issue, I think, that we accept in the market is first principle, and the title Accelerating Time to Market with Industrial Inkjet. First principle thinking is been around for a long time. I think it draws experience in the world of physics, but also from Aristotelian thought. The kind of definition is simple in that often in technology circles we tend to think technology first, and then we think problems second. And that's because often the technology ideas come from the technical department who love tinkering with technology. And as Elon Musk with his famous SpaceX innovation, when confronted with the problem that actually the raw technology of a rocket was too much for him to the cost-wise to absorb, he broke down the actual components of a rocket to create a solution based on first principle thinking. So first principle thinking is about looking at the problem first and then deploying the technology second. And Richard's now going to explain how this works within Industrial Inkjet, and Graham's going to join later on in terms of explaining how Ricoh is helping the wider manufacturing world adopt the right inkjet technology and processes to solve the right problems. So over to you, Richard.
Thank you. Do you want to just flip over there? We're disruptive people in Inkjet. We go to industries and we tell them that they're not doing it right. They've been doing it in an analog way, in a mature way for centuries in some cases. So we tell them they need to do it differently with digital, and the whole world's going digital. After Sign & Graphics took up Inkjet and in place of screen, when people said it also couldn't be done and it wouldn't be cost effective and so on, we've now since witnessed a ceramics revolution where Inkjet took over, but we go through other industries making lots of promises and not always delivering, or at least not yet. So perhaps we need to change the way that we do some things, and maybe Inkjet itself needs a bit of disruption. So we're going to talk here about changing consumers, brains and hearts. That's not medical, but it's related to the psychology of what we're dealing with. Crossing the chasm, which is Jeffrey Moore, a way of looking at things. Changing how we work, as I said. An example of Inkjet as applied to wood decor, and then how Ricoh is addressing a current industry problem that we see. So the consumers are changing from North Korean to Colorado. Many the same, mass-produced, have what you're given, through to I want this exactly and I want it now, or I don't want it. There's eco things coming in. Everybody's got their own opinions and value frameworks, and people want their needs put first. So this is very much changed from the old norm to, I hesitate to say new norm, but this is becoming the thing that people want what they want. They don't want what they're given. We use our right brain, and generally the brain is split. So right brain, left brain. Right brain is actually the creative side. It's the bit that has the emotional aspects attached to it. It's the feel. The left brain is the calculation. It's rational. It's not emotional. It's cold. So we go from creating ideas for a right brain, and then we have to look at the left brain activities of our customers, because in mature industries they are left brain. Left brain predictions are not truly accurate, because left brain thinkers actually, they tend to not even believe the things that they see. They don't believe that they'll catch on. They have to be convinced. They have to see compelling arguments. So famous examples here where people thought that flying machines were impossible. These are eminent scientists from the past. Flying machines are impossible, and electricity will never catch on. They were wrong. right brain thinkers, the people who actually don't think about how, they don't think about the techie, the build up from the bottom. They think about the vision of what people might like in a similar way to Elon Musk's rocket. Those tend to come true, whether it's a James Bond gimmick that's Q's developed or whether it's something in Star Trek. They tend to come true because they're tapping into the feelings of people. So the consumer's changing from brain to heart. The brain is based around physical need, the practical things, the things that we must have, and really logical buying. And on the heart side of things, people choose experiential things. They choose things that improve their feelings. They're impulsive. They maybe one time to another it changes, but they need variety and they need something that triggers them personally. That's what we're moving towards. So is this for Inkjet, is this an opportunity or a threat? We actually need to see what we can provide and whether it actually delivers what this type of consumer behavior is tending towards. So we have to remember what Inkjet offers, and we have to try and fit that into those consumers, either indirectly or directly. So what we actually offer, as compared with, say, gravure printing, is freedom of design. You don't have to tool up for a different design. Flexibility of production, so you can have any batch size, you can have one. It's just data. People can create their own artwork. They can have it printed themselves, as we see in things like T-shirts and so on. You're not constrained to a rigid manufacturing process where preparation has to be put into each job. That means we can do customization, personalization, and we can go from a push Stalinist kind of tradition, the North Korean, to a pull, which is where people ask for what they want and they get it. And our speed of response to those demands can be impressive with Inkjet, provided that Inkjet is applied in the right way. So you can also simplify production because you can have all of that variety in one line that's serving the many. So here's an example of where it's not in the right place. Inkjet's not in the right place. Sorry to root out textile because there are some fantastic developments in single pass textile, but single pass textile is designed to put configurability, the batch size of one and so on and so forth, into the far end of an intercontinental supply chain, as far as you can possibly get from the customers that it serves. So how can this possibly improve work in progress, inventory, wastage through obsolescence or time within the supply chain and storage, and the risks of the whole thing? So if you're planning what consumers want at one end of that supply chain and producing it, then consumers have a habit of changing their minds, and circumstances change as well, as we've seen during 2020. So how can this deliver economic benefit? And what problem does it solve? It's actually substitutional. It's just replacing analog that works okay with digital, and it's applying digital in the wrong way. That's my premise. In the inkjet industry, the industrial inkjet industry, we see everybody thinks that everything is an opportunity. And you see that fragmented color bar there that shows that we're chasing all sorts of different things. Now, I'm pretty sure that we can't produce inkjet equipment to fit into every circumstance in every industry sector in the same way. We have to be sensitive to those individual sectors and what they actually need. And some of those sectors probably we might be developing something for, and it's not suitable. So we have to be focused and define what we're trying to achieve. If we look at the next slide, which is what we see is impeding our growth, I'm talking about the inkjet industry. We see that the biggest single sector is technical barriers. So that shows tech first thinking, as Marcus mentioned. Tech first thinking is looking at, we always need something extra. And sometimes that's wrapped up in customers not confident as well. But the biggest part of the bar is actually the challenges are commercial. Sometimes they're collaborating between individual players to create an overall solution, being less adversarial. Sometimes they're convincing customers with what we've got instead of having a moving feast where technology moves on and people are encouraged to jump in, knowing that whatever they jump into is going to be obsolete. So there's no stability and there's no convincing economic argument. This is the hype cycle. We promise big, everybody's excited, the visionaries adopt, inflated expectations, and then actually it can't do what they said it would do. So to take the textile example, you can't actually respond to customers' actual demands because you're at the far end of the supply chain. So you fall into the trough of disillusionment. So how do you climb out of that trough? It depends what the characteristics are in the chasm, that chasm or the trough. There are cultural barriers. There are objections that are not necessarily the right objections, but they're objections and they're related to culture rather than fact. Some customers think it's easy, and that adds to disillusionment. They think it's going to be easy because they haven't actually necessarily thought it through, or they bought the arguments or they bought the vision, but without it actually being configured in the right way. Some of the big names aren't investing because they're reluctant to jump onto the train because the train is moving. The various other things there, we make it difficult for ourselves in some respect. Poor collaboration, too many NDAs, unclear sales arguments, unclear arguments at all, economic arguments or other. And we're not actually making it easy for people to come in. And of course, every solution we create is different because we're aiming for bespoke and listening to customer needs, but we're actually designing something that's to a customer's perceived need. So we're allowing the customers to demand from us in a pull environment. What we should be doing is predetermining our solutions with first principle thinking to come up with standards so that we push to people to enable them to transfer their supply models to their customers and their customers' customers from a push to a pull. So it's a bit of a tongue twister, but we're opposite. When we start to climb out of the chasm, we're hitting the mainstream market. That means that we're hitting economic buyers, people who buy with left brains. They're considering what we're offering against the incumbent technology, and they're actually making calculated decisions. It makes sense to those customers. Otherwise, it doesn't climb out of that chasm. We have to show that we are producing solutions to real problems. Then we're meeting compelling customer needs, customers' needs, or customers' customers, or customers' needs. We have to look at each niche because you have to have examples to prove it. So you generally conquer a niche and then spread from that, and that's why it's called the bowling alley. Because what we're aiming to do is to knock one into another, so that it's easier to overcome the resistances. The problems are that people are pretty risk averse. The people we're selling to, some of that's created by ourselves and the moving targets and so on. But we're aiming for the mass adoption, which comes after the bowling alley, the tornado. That's when it becomes far easier for us to sell. We don't have to work so hard. We've got plenty of cases that prove what we're doing is worthwhile. And we don't have to build massive arguments to be scrutinized in detail because it's obvious that it works. We haven't hit that spot in many industries yet. So first principle thinking is the opposite of continuous improvement. Continuous improvement focuses on doing what you do a little bit better, and it's tech first. What we have to do is find a problem, a real problem, probably an economic problem, because we're asking people to part with money and make investments. Does digital solve it? Not necessarily. So there's no dogma in this. If it doesn't, then we should walk away. If it does, then we have to think carefully about how it can solve that problem in the best way. It probably needs supply chain change, because when you centralize print, you design a supply chain around that model. We probably do need supply chain change, which can in itself be difficult to achieve. If it's too difficult, it's not going to work. But notable examples, I mentioned ceramics. That's where things needed to change. When there's a reason to change, then it must change. In textile, it's difficult in the current circumstances to prepare seasonal product when 2 seasons have been taken out by a pandemic, as an example. So the wastage in that scenario can be considerable. And first principle thinking doesn't consider what's gone before. It actually thinks of the better way of doing something with the current tools. We have to be aware that customers themselves need to sell to their customers. So we have to be clear on what they're selling, how it changes their operation, and how they change their offering to their markets. And we have to mitigate opposition forces. Mistrust is a big force against, but we have to mitigate those with demonstrable successes. So I would say design what works, what solves the problem. Stop playing trump cards and minimize risk. Design standards, not bespoke. I think we could go into detail on this, but these are the sort of questions that economic buyers ask. What they really want to know is, how does it do it compared to what they do now? What's the cost in change? And that can be money, it can be other things, to adapt from what was before or what is now to what could be in the future. And does it give them any economic benefit to do so? That's not just a simple thing about ink price. That's actually something that takes into account warehouse space. It takes into account risks in an operation. It takes into account capital employed, cash flow. There's lots of things. And in some cases, it means that the producer who is to buy our technology can do their business or must do their business in an entirely different way. Sometimes it's too radical to change. Sometimes it's inevitable it will happen, but there has to be a timing to these things. These are all the considerations of a left-brain buyer. So I mentioned trump cards. We're all focused in the inkjet industry on tiny drops and many more of them, higher speeds, but really that might not be. That's continuous improvement and tech first. What people maybe want is a Volvo estate to carry the loads in their business, rather than a sexy Ferrari or an F1 car, which on spec looks fantastic, but it doesn't actually do what it should do to solve the problem. So some of these tech first things that the industry of inkjet gets tied up in are not necessarily the best solutions. And of course, our developments have to be at a price that works at the end of it. And we can spend 10 times more developing the next 10% than we would do for a perfectly adequate solution. Things like print snobbery and what constitutes ink quality, image quality are all relevant here. And what customers tell us are not necessarily their own thoughts. They're possibly what somebody else in the inkjet industry has told them. Next, our process to getting a product to market, apart from the thinking and the conceptual end of things, how we get to market is pretty adversarial. We actually have developments in silos where developers, OEMs, have to pull things together, whether it's an ink supply system or drive electronics or software or componentry of any sort, including print heads. They have to pull it together and evaluate how it all fits together with each permutation. And sometimes they decide to develop it themselves, which is time consuming and usually unexpectedly cost consuming. It delays time to market. There is a natural place for some of these things to take place, and it's not necessarily where we always do it. The way that we do it can deliver very, very long development times, and that's not good for something that claims to be very responsive. So, Graham, do you want to?
Yeah, thank you, Richard. I think, food for thought for many on today's session there, I think. But now maybe a little bit about Ricoh's role in this process. I think our aim for sure is to become that go-to company for digital transformation, predominantly in analog industrial printing processes. For us to be that one-stop shop for application development using Inkjet as a source technology. And I think by doing this, our ultimate goal is to reduce both the time and the risk between innovation and the market. And I believe this is our biggest USP. I think for many, mass customization is a huge driver as markets concentrate on the added value possibilities of digital print. And of course, this does represent huge opportunities across multiple vertical markets. Many of these markets are still analog, so they've yet to experience the transition that we've already seen, as you highlighted, Richard, in ceramics or sign and display, or early in the textile markets. But I think for us, it's clear that inkjet printing will disrupt more industrial markets in the same way as we have seen, and there will be an increasing need for collaborative support as these markets transition. I think at Ricoh, next slide, thank you, Marcus. At Ricoh, our scale allows us the ability to be much more than just a provider of print heads and individual components, but to really add value by linking them together to go beyond just the technology. To many of our partners, we are increasingly more than just a printhead specialist providing individual componentry. Printheads by themselves are becoming increasingly commoditized, so adding value and leveraging our engineering and our manufacturing expertise is just one way for us to add value at different stages to our partners' journey to accelerate their technology developments. I think many of our customers, many of our partners, they are R&D technology innovators. They develop a product, but they might not necessarily have the right infrastructure to take that product to market. Ricoh can support them in different ways to do this more efficiently, to ensure that we are more than just a provider of technology. A couple of examples might be the deployment of our field service technicians, or we can use our world-class supply chain network to fulfill supply chain needs, whether that be consumables, products, or spare parts. And I think by taking this approach, we are seeing more and more that we are being brought in as subject matter experts, not just from a product perspective, but importantly from a process perspective as well. Next slide, please, Marcus. So I think whilst we're not alone in this ecosystem, we have a very favorable position as a supplier of parts, inks, modules, and technical expertise. When we combine this with our current industry experience and our global engineering competence, a clear USP emerges. I think we are one of, possibly the only company that can supply all of these elements of innovation, whilst also delivering the necessary engineering expertise and knowledge that enables businesses to accelerate their pace of innovation, whilst importantly decreasing the potential cost of getting it wrong along the way. I think by removing the risk for industrial innovators and partners, we accelerate their time to market. We can facilitate more assured outcomes and can further stimulate competitive creativity. I think this forms the basis of a partnership for accelerated innovation, and a great example of which is our collaboration with Human. And I think this is really a best of both worlds, where Human are the experienced vendor in the woodworking industry. They've got years, 200 years of experience. They've got the knowledge. They've got access to the customer base. They've got an existing installed base of already digital lines, 41 at the last count, and their customers are producing almost 100 million square meters a year of digitally printed woodworking output.
Should I take over from here, Graham?
Sorry, I just had another call coming through, but I've just got rid of it quickly. And on the other side, we've got obviously Ricoh, where we're providing our expertise and our technology as a best-in-class collaboration. So Richard, yes, over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Graham. I was just laughing there about Human's 200 years, but calculating it's probably nearer 200 years than it is 100. So currently there are three ways to use digital print in the woodworking industry, in the wood decor industry. It's printed on paper. So you can buy the printed paper from a central location, from an external supplier. That's the traditional model. Doesn't improve the physical or any other workflow. And it doesn't actually give end customers any more variety or faster response. So that's one option. The second option is there's a plethora of multi-pass printers that would be capable of doing these things. There are some materials and chemistry differences, but that they're easily addressable with a multi-pass printer. However, a multi-pass printer, even in its most productive, at the most productive end of the market, is not going to meet the mainstream capacity needs of a board producer. So we've got a mismatch there. The other way is with a single pass printer, where there are offerings on the market currently, which really are tailored towards the digital analogic way of thinking, which is central printing. Justified by the capex and also the capacity that capex brings, you could only put those really in the central locations or the very biggest board producers. Even the biggest producers have multi-site locations, so it might be better for them to have something with a lower capacity in more than one location rather than the big centralized inkjet devices. So there's a map of a graph. To the left, we've got throughput capacity, low throughput capacity and multi-pass. To the right, we've got high throughput of the single pass printers. The investment is on the vertical axis, and we've got that little red zone just at the bottom there, which says this is where the board, between the dotted lines, that's where the board producer needs the capacity to be. That's dictated by downstream processes that they have to impregnate and they have to press. So to be balanced, that's the throughput. Also with the workflow, I mentioned workflow just a moment ago. We've got half a dozen paper printers, centralized paper printers, very large operations with multi-printer, gravure printer, so that they have massive capacity. They supply paper all over the continent, all over the world to, in the Western world, maybe about 1,000 board producers. So it's the few serve the many, which means that you've got paper from mills going to printers and then being scattered everywhere else to the board producers, with board producers sourcing in many cases from more than one source, but it's outsourced. That's not logistically or time-wise a very efficient process. So those time and cost in the top diagram, the external printing, all those times and costs and wastage of cost and the uncertainties involved in that can be replaced by taking vanilla paper and then flavoring to order at the point where it's demanded. So changing from push to pull, as I talked about earlier. So the bottom model is where it seems to work best from a whole process perspective. So faced with that same chart, the space is obvious where the solution needs to be from first principles, and it's there. So that's where Human have aimed for it to be. On the next slide, we show that this is not going to win a trump card specification. It's slower, it's simpler and safer. It's effectively the Volvo load carrier. It's not a Ferrari. So if we were the trump card, we'd be losing to the fast speed sports car all the time, except it would keep going and keep going and keep going. It wouldn't be subject to the frailty, which is inherent in the technology when you push it to its limits. So it's still, if you put it in it's balanced to the throughput. So if you put it at the end, decentralized, then you change it from push to pull, you configure to order. It adds the flexibility so that you can take a rainbow roll printed with many different designs. You can print small numbers of boards from one reel of paper for many customers, all on the same stream of process with no changeover and therefore efficiency, both cash efficiency and operational efficiency. So it's actually for the board producers, it doesn't fit in the current model of supply. Having said that, in document printing, that is also decentralized, but it's often run by the big printer specialists as an in-plant service. Ricoh does some of that itself. So it doesn't mean to say that the big printers couldn't relocate their operations to the board producer so they can respond more quickly using an appropriate device. Now, this is, as I said, appealing to left brain. You have to lay out, this is a shortened version of the paper that accompanies this. We studied it in detail so that we can explain it to our customers and they can explain it internally to each other, and then they can make their plans accordingly. But we've got nothing hidden here. We've looked at the profit and loss and balance sheet of a board producer across a range of different scales, and we know how much it will cost between the current model and the proposed model and other propositions with Inkjet as well. So in our view, that's a pretty powerful model. So that was an example of a project where we've been very interested and partaken in because it's actually first principle thinking and it does solve an industry problem. We have others similar, and we think there are many, many more to come. As Graham says, that there many more industries will be disrupted by the capabilities of inkjet technology. So we're thinking about how we can support that.
Yeah, I think if I can come in here as well, Richard, I think what we see on this slide is really Ricoh's approach as an engaged and responsible supplier, and it's our response to ever-changing market needs. This pandemic that we're all going through, it's resulted in, due to companies' cash starvation, it's resulted in projects, new developments being postponed. For many, these projects' timings are critical in terms of an analog to digital conversion journey. So rather than watching these projects melt away, at Ricoh, we want to use our position of strength, not just to support partners through this crisis, but to help accelerate these projects' delivery. There are many ways in which we can do this. Strong commercial and technical support has always been the foundation of our business, but we also have other tools, financial tools, at our disposal that could be very relevant in today's turbulent market. So listed on the slide here are just some of the ways in which we believe we can support our customers bring their projects through to fruition. So that could be through the free issuance of printheads for a selected number of projects. It could be the fact that we can extend payment terms to help financially. It could be that we co-fund or completely fund projects ourselves. And the Human project that Richard talked through is a great example of that proposal number 4. We can use our in-house Ricoh Capital finance tools to extend financial options for our OEM partners. And we could equally look at leasing of printheads. So our OEMs or end users could pay a quarterly charge rather than buying a printhead, a reliable guaranteed lifetime within a defined cost, which I'm sure is extremely attractive to many end customers today.
And so just a question here for both of you. This is in itself a kind of first principle idea, isn't it? You kind of, as you've just indicated, you recognise that the market's in a problematic phase. Innovation still continues, but albeit with perhaps a dented in its confidence somewhat. Is there a market focus to any of these projects? Because obviously, if your Inkjet can play in various markets, do you have any specific market that you're more interested in working in, or are you just open to ideas?
I think if I can take that one, I think we're open to ideas because it's not necessarily the ones that on the face of it, it's not following the herd. Some of the opportunities for change in industry, they evolve. So, for example, packaging is one of the few industries during the last 9 months that's done very, very well because people have been buying more packaging with the products they need to survive, and it's sort of carried on unabated. So, but at the same time, they need to do something different. So you overlay that they've done very well. So do they need to fix anything? Probably not. But then they do need to fix something because some markets have run out of some products because they're packaged in a different format. So it's very difficult to predict which one's going to be the key sector. But I think really it's anything that's thought through will qualify whether a development is sensible or not. And there's no prejudgment. We have some strategic aims. We are aiming for particular sectors, and we have plans in place for some of those sectors. But that doesn't mean to say that we're not open to ones that are the same or similar, or ones that are completely different.
And would you expect to see some new, or have you even indeed heard of any, or seen of any evidence of any sort of new ideas that have come as a result of the last few months? The kind of people are kind of going, actually, this is now a requirement. We need to really quickly develop this because it's now that we really need it.
Well, we've actually watched certain things happening. So, for example, people are looking for more variety. They're looking for less standard in interior design, interior decor. They're also, I mentioned the single pass textile there, the reshoring. So to take risk out of people's businesses, they're having to shorten supply chains. So we've noticed that for sure. If you bring back something that is closer to consumers, so that you create what they're going to buy or configure what they're going to buy closer to them, there's much less risk and much less cash tied up. So there are some basic business fundamentals there that show that initiatives are being taken.
And I guess it's that sense to which the pressure's on now. Now's the time to actually make those plays, because actually, if you don't move forward, obviously you're going to be sort of held back in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're absolutely right, Marcus. The pressure is on, and so the message from Ricoh is tell us what your constraints are. Let us understand how we can help. If we can help from a technology perspective, from a commercial perspective, from a financial perspective, we want to explore those opportunities and work together in collaboration to see what we can do.
That's quite. And how would someone go about connecting with you on that? So, literally initially an email and then a conversation. Obviously, we have networking at the virtual summit. There's opportunities to meet you there. Is it?
There's all of those things. As a big company like Ricoh, you'd expect to have to fill out forms or something. I suppose we're suggesting here that we could be slightly like a bank. So there'd be a form, but it's not. It's really nothing like that. It doesn't need that. What it actually needs is for somebody to just make contact, and then we can talk it through, go through it, and we know what we need to know, and we will quickly gauge what we need to add, or what's missing from the piece. And if it's Ricoh, great. If it's somebody from another participant, another partner, then we can bring them in too. So we're looking to connect the pieces of the jigsaw to make it more reliable.
So an ideal kind of candidate would be somebody who's working within an OEM or an OEM within an industry. Is that kind of a key kind of criteria for you? Could
be an OEM. Yeah. It could be, say, for example, I mentioned packaging. It could be a consumer brand. It could be a fashion house for textile. It could be an automotive producer. It could be somebody who serves those industries, either as a whole or in a niche, because in every industry there's going to be a sort of bottleneck process where, I'll take one is aircraft painting. Aircraft painting is the constraint on aircraft manufacturing. It might not be a good thing now because there's reduced demand for aircraft in the current climate, but that was one example where in the refinishing of aircraft could actually release production capacity. So you wouldn't actually, on first thoughts, you wouldn't say, I'm going to target that. But when you look at the fundamentals, it does make sense. So, and the other thing I should say is that it doesn't matter whether it's a small operation or a small company or a big company, it's the strength of the idea that counts. Do you agree with that, Graham?
Yes, Richard. Yes.
And obviously, based on the whole, but based on the whole theme of the session, obviously, you're keen on hearing about sort of first principle problem solving. Real life problems that have where Inkjet can play a role that solves something quickly and efficiently and creates value for both the marketplace, your partner, and obviously Ricoh.
Yeah, and seeing whether we could add something that's missing, or whether we can connect something that's missing if it's not a Ricoh solution. And it's doing more than just simply supplying print heads or other componentry. It's perhaps the rigor of thought, the rigor of qualification of the idea, and it's not. It's certainly not adversarial.
No, it's partnership oriented. So I think it's a fantastic idea, given the situation where that we find ourselves in now, and also going forward as we start to move towards recovery. It's offering help, perhaps where there would be, like I say, a bit of a barrier to trying new things. And I think it's really critical right now that we move forward with new ideas, we try things out, and so on. Because staying still really doesn't protect you. I don't think it holds you back. But is there anything else you wanted to add before we kind of, move to the last slide?
No, I think we just summarised there the end that justifies the means. First principle thinking is find the problem first. The tech is just a means to an end. It's not the be all and and end all. It's just the means to solving problems. They're tools. We sometimes get a bit wrapped up in the tech first way of thinking. Applying digital advantage, not just because it's digital and sticking it in the wrong place. We should be thinking about where it creates best effect, how it best solves the problem. So that goes hand in hand. Not looking at what went before, not copying what's existing already, because we see some notable examples where that doesn't work. And digital, however good it is, it's not going to be the same as analog. It's just different. And I've heard various people saying, stop trying to do analog things with a digital printer, which is very true. It does things differently. Analog is a very good way of doing certain things. So work with it, not against it. And there are players in that market, in that sector, with that expertise that we should respect and work with rather than battle up against. Getting our story straight is compelling arguments. We've got to develop compelling arguments, and that comes from thinking it through for a start. So if we think it through, then the story gets straightened because we have to prove it to ourselves. That's how we're going to proving the economic benefit is how we're going to cross the chasm. The process of bringing product to market needs more collaboration. It needs more joined up thinking. So we should do that. And in the last example, the last slide, I think Ricoh could be considered to be a big player. So we need to step up. There's a responsibility here. It's not just us selling stuff. We need to actually step up and support the whole industry. So in summary, we've got to use the right side of our brains to appeal to the left side of our customers' brains.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, gentlemen. That was great. I think it's a great idea, and people want to connect with you. You have a profile on the Virtual Summit website, which has a link to your details and your email addresses. And thanks so much for being part of it, for supporting the event, and well done at creating a great kind of concept around first principle that hopefully will enable people to continue to innovate into the future. So thank you very much.